By listening to this short presentation, less than 20 minutes, it will retrain you as a parent regarding how to think about what's most important to ensure that your teenager has a great life, lives their dreams, and makes great decisions and fulfills their potential. What are the things we need to be doing now to prepare them for the realities that are going to face them soon enough if they haven't already begun to? Of all the decisions we make in a typical day, hundreds a day, thousands a week, millions over the course of a lifetime, in the teenage years, there's 7 critical decisions that all teens need to make, that the way they make these decisions and what they end up doing will have a tremendous impact on the quality of their life. It'll determine whether or not they go through a period of time of months, years, if not decades, of frustration, disappointment, underachieving, or whether they set themselves from a very early age on a trajectory that's going to lead to success, happiness, fulfillment, and the realization of their greatest potential. So what are these 7 critical decisions? Well, let me go through them, and I'll go through this relatively quickly, but give you some examples along the way. So the first one is making the decision about who their friends are going to be. At this age, it's really not possible for parents to have much influence over who their teen chooses to be friends with. But teens get to choose. And what ends up happening is who they choose to associate with, who they spend the majority of their time with in their social time, is going to have a tremendous impact on their beliefs, their values, their attitudes, their behaviors. And this choice can either lead them down a road where they end up making a lot of bad decisions and getting themselves into trouble or settling for mediocrity, or associating with the right friends, making this choice in a really smart way can put them on a trajectory where they'll be challenged and surround themselves with people who are going places, will bring out the best in them and help them fulfill their greatest potential. So big decision number 1 is who are their friends going to be? The next one is whose opinions are going to matter to them, whose approval will matter to them. Because as social beings, we all seek the approval of others. This is part of what it is to be human. But as teenagers, so often they're seeking the approval of their peers, and doing what it takes to get the approval of their peers oftentimes puts them on a trajectory, on a path that leads to underachieving or just settling or dumbing themselves down just to be able to gain acceptance by a certain crowd of people. But to choose a different kind of person to seek the approval of, to make the choices in life and do the behaviors which would get the approval of somebody else, could totally reset the direction of their life. So an example, a recent HeroPath program, a 16-year-old talked about wanting to become a fashion designer. And we were talking about whose approval would matter to her at this stage of her life. And I said to her, so you probably typically wake up and each day you think about, what do I have to do to get the approval of my friends or get the approval of my teachers to get the grades I want, or even the approval of my parents so that they'll give me the keys to the car. And she kind of laughs when I say that. I said, imagine what it would be like instead to be at 16 years old, the person you are now, and every day waking up and making decisions and taking actions that would get the approval of the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine. So that when she saw what you were doing and saw the behaviors and the decisions you were making and the quality of work that you were producing and the effort you were putting in, she looked and she said, I approve of that person. That's the kind of person I want to come work for me. And then imagine you start doing what it would take to get the approval of that person, starting at 16 years old, but you do it for the next 10 years. And now imagine you're 26 years old and you show up in the interview for Vogue magazine, you and the person who spent the last 10 years getting the approval of their peers. Who's got the advantage? This girl sat up in her seat and was ready to jump out of her seat and get going in that moment to redirect the focus of her attention and where her efforts were going. So whose opinions and approval will matter to them? It's not a matter of if alcohol, drugs, and sex are going to play a role in their lives. It's just a matter of when, because it's just a part of life in the modern world. And whereas alcohol and drugs and sex have always played a life in the life of teenagers, it did for us as their parents, and it did for our grandparents and for generations before that, the risk factors associated with especially the drugs that young people are working with today, the drugs that are far more toxic, especially as they get into using pharmaceuticals and these human-created, chemically enhanced drugs that they're taking are seriously high-risk factors in young people's lives. In the United States, 1 in 5 teenagers has a sexually transmitted disease, and this is in part because they're going through a phase right now where the attitudes towards sex are extremely casual, the culture of hooking up. So because parents aren't going to be there when alcohol, drugs, and sex come up in their young person's life, the question becomes, what decisions are teens, your son and daughter, going to make about alcohol, drugs, and sex? Because the decisions they make can have implications which could be lifelong implications in the worst ways imaginable, or potentially put them on a path where they're just going to consistently make smart, healthy choices around this stuff and lead to happy, fulfilling relationships and happy, fulfilling lives. So, major decision. What role will alcohol, drugs, and sex play in their life? Life inevitably has disappointments and setbacks. How they handle the disappointments and setbacks is a major critical decision in their life. What so many teenagers do when they have a disappointment or setback is get down on themselves or go out and seek people who will agree with their victim stance that they take about how the coach plays favorites or things weren't set up in a fair way. But if they handle their disappointments and setbacks with maturity, they have the opportunity to go through painful life lessons, learn from them at an early age, and then not repeat them repeatedly for years, which is what many people do. They have the chance to learn great value out of their disappointments and setbacks and turn these things into these things that ultimately give them an advantage as they go forward in their life. So it's one of the questions that I often confront them with is, are you hanging out with people when you have a disappointment or setback? Do you seek out people who tell you what you want to hear, or do you seek out people who tell you what you need to hear? Do you ask yourself the question, what role did I play and what went on? And do you learn from it? And then you ask yourself the question, how can I apply this so the next time this comes up, I'll handle it much better and this won't be a problem in the future? So major decision point for teenagers. Whose advice are they going to follow as they're making the critical decisions in their life, the difficult choices they make as they get into friend situations, girlfriend-boyfriend situations, the career path they're going to go down? Who are they going to seek advice from? And this goes not just to turning to their peers who have little to no more experience about these things than many teenagers themselves do. It also goes oftentimes even to the teachers in their school who haven't really been out in the real world and had real world experience in the business world to be able to tell you what it really takes to be able to be successful in life. So whose advice are they going to follow? And choosing this one carefully and choosing this one wisely will make a tremendous impact on their future, their happiness, their success, and ultimately the fulfillment of their potential. Next big one. What career direction will they take? And by career direction, this doesn't just mean what do you want to be when you grow up. It means the whole way in which you approach school, the whole way you approach university, what you choose to major in, all these kind of factors that teenagers have to take into consideration as they're choosing how they're going to spend their time during their teen years and their young adult life is what career direction will they take? Because the direction they go in is going to be the cumulative experiences that they have that ultimately will lead them to finding that kind of job where they're going to really be happy and they'll thrive and be able to live a life where they can wake up every single morning and look forward to what they're doing, to join that select group of people who are actually really happy with their lives, not just personally, but also professionally. Major life decision that young people need to make. And this last one is a bit of a philosophical one. It's the question when. When will they begin to take their education seriously? When will they have that difficult talk with their friend? When will they start being more disciplined and healthier and making smarter choices about their health and well-being? When will they take more responsibility for their life? When will they learn more mature ways to handle the situations that they're challenged with in life? Delaying and waiting just because they can, while that's an option, for many teens is actually not the best decision to make. But being able to answer when and knowing when's the right time to start taking these choices and then having the character and the tools to make those choices and act on those choices is what separates them from living the ordinary mundane life to the extraordinary life that HeroPath for Teens is designed to empower and help train and prepare them to live. HeroPath for Teens runs trainings and workshops for teenagers and young adults, offering mentoring and life skills that make a tremendous difference in producing positive results and empowering them to go on and lead amazing lives. My name is Jeff Lyken. I live in San Francisco, California, and I'm not just the master trainer of HeroPath for Teens. I'm also, like you, a parent myself, dealing with the same issues and watching my children grow up in this complex world and having to make all sorts of decisions about what's it going to take to help them have the advantage that they need so that they can have a truly happy, fulfilling, thriving life. In my professional life, I've spent over 25 years mentoring teenagers around the globe. Though I'm based in San Francisco, I have clients across North America and Europe and expanding into Asia this year. And I have a unique model of approaching the work with young people, because rather than treat them like they're people that have psychological disorders or mental illness and sending them off to therapy, what my clients seek from me is the fact that I treat them like they're people who are just making decisions and needing to learn critical life skills and developing the tools that will allow them to thrive. My specialty is in working with smart, sensitive, deeper thinking, perceptive youth and helping them grow into the kind of people that our world desperately needs. This is Des Barry. Des grew up on a farm in rural New Zealand, didn't eat at a restaurant until he was 15 years old. When he was 16, a coworker of his at a factory job that he had sold him a motorcycle. Des got on that motorcycle thinking that it would just be fun to be able to go out and pick up girls and go out and have a fun time as a teenager, not knowing that about 6 years later, he would be inspired on that motorcycle to leave New Zealand, move to Europe, move to England, and eventually go on and become the British national champion motorcycle racer, and when he retired, one of the top 3 racers in the world. Des lives in suburban London. He's raising his son and his daughter, and is my colleague and co-trainer of HeroPath for Teens. Des brings this remarkable life story of having come literally from poverty to go on and becoming a world champion, of persevering, of overcoming the difficult challenges, and of developing the kind of focus that it takes to be able to produce results and get success, even when the pressure and all the odds are against. So your son or daughter must make these 7 critical decisions: how they're going to deal with disappointment, who are they going to be friends with, how are they going to deal with drugs, alcohol, and sex, whose advice are they going to seek, whose opinions will matter to them, what career direction are they going to go, and when. And how they answer these questions is going to determine the quality of their life, not just as teenagers, but potentially for the next 20 or 30 years ahead, if not the rest of their life, because these are critical life decisions. And HeroPath is designed to help train teens and teach them fundamental skills and awareness and give them tools that they need to ensure that they make excellent decisions for themselves and have what it takes to act on those decisions so they can see their life through and go on this remarkable journey, their own hero path. What do we offer? Well, this is not a get-together and write in your journal, feel good, counseling, therapy, woo-woo, cry on each other's shoulders, do icebreakers, team-building thing. This is absolutely definitively not that. This is a serious training in foundational, fundamental, very sophisticated things that will empower them to be able to go on and really live these amazing lives that are possible. So one of the things that we offer in HeroPath that's exclusive, offered nowhere else in the world, is elite performance attention training based on the mythogenic self process of Dr. Joseph Riggio from Princeton, New Jersey, training them in the ability to be able to have precision focus so that no matter what kind of stressful situations they get themselves in, whether it's job interview, exams, or being able to go up and have a difficult conversation with somebody, they're able to compose themselves and perform amazing under pressure. This is a somatic training. It's literally training them in their bodies what they need to do to have that kind of focus of attention. We train them to heighten their awareness of their instincts and their intuitions, and to train their instincts so that they notice the subtle signals that their bodies are constantly sending them, letting them know whether or not the person they're talking to is somebody who they can trust and believe, or the signal that comes up inside that says you should leave the party or not get in that car, or the intuition that said to go and pursue this field of study even when it makes no rational sense. And the reason we train them in this is because the world's greatest decision makers are filled with stories about following instincts and intuitions. Recently, Steve Jobs, after he died, in the YouTube video that went around about his commencement address he gave at Stanford, talks about how following his instincts to leave school, to follow his interest in calligraphy class, which turned into the fonts that defined the Apple operating system. I mean, amazing stories about this. This is what we're training them to do. Lastly, we train them on how to live their life through a positive bias, how to build their life around their strengths, their talents, and their interests. This is not the kind of classic advice about find your passion, because very few people ever find their passion. This is about being able to live your life around your strengths, your talents, your interests, and no matter what situations that you find yourself in, to orient through a positive bias, to always search for possibilities. So when others are busy feeling sorry for themselves and complaining, we train teenagers to always be oriented around, how can I work my way through this? Where can I find an opportunity that doesn't exist yet? Or where are the ones that exist that I'm missing? to orient through this positive bias, which is critical to being able to have amazing success, especially in today's chaotic, complex world. So this is the kind of thing that happens. This is what teenagers who are trained in what we teach at HeroPath, this is what they end up getting in their life. See, when they get them right, when they make these decisions right, they end up getting things like confidence, success, satisfaction, great relationships, clarity of thinking, clarity of their own decision making. They know what direction to be going with their career. They have maturity. They have happiness in their life. And perhaps as critical and valuable as anything is it saves them years of trial and error learning because they know how to get advice from the right people, how to surround themselves with the right people, how to ask themselves the right questions to learn from life's disappointments. And this is what a HeroPath trained teen looks like. And then there are those who don't get this kind of training, those who go through life in the ordinary way. Now, I could be cliche and overly dramatic and say, folks, if you don't send your son or daughter to HeroPath, this is what they're going to look like. But let's face it, that's a nice, over-dramatized hype, because the reality is what more and more teenagers seem to look like are these kids here. A little bit bored, disconnected, more excited about their video games, bored with school, struggling with friend problems, not necessarily knowing how to deal with them. And oftentimes the teenage years become a time of great struggle and great loneliness for many of them. So they end up making decisions that are not the best decisions. And when they get these decisions wrong, they end up having unnecessary frustration, stress. They end up underachieving, oftentimes becoming followers, missing opportunities in their life, and sadly, more than anything else, settling for less. Let me give you a couple stories about teens who've been trained in the HeroPath model and have really embodied and embraced the tools. This is Charles. Charles grew up in a very challenging background. He grew up in inner city United States. By the time he was 14 years old, was selling drugs, struggling in school. His father had a lot of problems, really wasn't in his life. He was living with relatives in a really rundown government housing project, and he was really absolutely in so many ways on the path to winding up as that statistic that we so often look at in the United States of urban youth, in prison, maybe even dead. Charles was 14 when he came in contact with the training in HeroPath. His eyes wide open, his ears wide open. He was ready to take in any knowledge and wisdom that could be offered to him. And by applying what he learned through HeroPath, went to high school, the first in his family to graduate from high school, graduated actually with honors, became a straight-A student, went to university, was a all-state wrestler, was invited to wrestle and be on the wrestling team at university, eventually went to graduate school. And this is Charles now as a young man, 28 years old, long-term relationship, working in law enforcement, and has grown into the kind of man that any of us would be proud to call our son. And what changed in Charles' life was at 14 years old, getting exposed to the tools and the training of HeroPath and applying them in his life and making these 7 critical decisions: who he was going to associate with, whose advice he would listen to, whose opinions would matter to him, how he was going to handle drugs, alcohol, and sex, when he was going to begin to take action. All these kinds of things that applied in his life that turned Charles into an incredible success story. A young man really living his HeroPath. This is Amy. Amy, bright student, lots of friends, no question was going to be going to university, really on track in her life, lived in Midlands in England, and was just in so many ways a bright, charming girl. Well, she comes to HeroPath, not because there was anything wrong in her life, but mainly she was curious. Relatives of her had told her about it and said, I want to learn a little bit more about this and see if it offers me something. Well, the end of HeroPath, she realized that she'd been making several decisions that were actually putting a ceiling, like this glass ceiling on her life. One of which is that while she was excelling academically, she really held back athletically, even though she liked sports. So she made decisions that she was going to start to pursue a sport that she loved, and the sport was ultimate frisbee. She joined her club team. She was invited from there to play on a local area team, and she did really well, and all of a sudden began to find out that she was a leader, that she had this talent that had she not applied what HeroPath offered her, had she not made the decision to start acting different in her life, she never would have found out that she had what it took to become part of the British national team and compete in international tournaments representing her country. And this is all in a very short window of time. You can read her whole testimonial on our website on the testimonial page, and you'll understand. She says, everything in my life was great before I came to HeroPath, but I found out that there's something different, the difference between great and being truly extraordinary. Amy's now in university. Amy's doing amazing in her life, and she's a great example, an amazing in a way example of what happens when somebody applies the tools and training of HeroPath into their life. And they start making these 7 critical decisions. How am I going to handle disappointment in my life? How will I handle drugs, alcohol, and sex? Whose advice will I follow? Whose opinions will matter to me? What career direction will I go? And when? This is the value of a HeroPath training and mentoring program. It leads to teenagers making great choices, building great relationships, and leading truly extraordinary lives. It's a weekend training program coupled with a 6-month-long mentoring program with individualized as well as group guidance as they go through applying the learning in their life and ensuring that it leads to them having the kind of success and happiness that's possible. So what do you do now as a parent? Well, you can say this was an interesting video. I'm glad I visited the site, but there's 69 million other ones I could be looking at. Or trust your instincts. Is there something in what I'm saying to you as I'm speaking to you today that you know your teen would benefit from what's being offered here? And you want your teen to get this kind of training. And I'll go one step further and I'll tell you that at HeroPath for Teens, Des and I have made a decision to 100% guarantee success. We 100% guarantee that we will deliver on what we said, that your teen will walk away from this, have learned things of real life value that will help them to make better decisions in their life and empower them to be able to go on and act on those decisions even when it isn't easy to do it. Because what it is to live the hero path is to have the courage and the strength of a hero, to be able to do the right thing even when it isn't easy. HeroPath for Teens offers trainings and workshops around the world. Visit HeroPathForTeens.com. Take a look at the upcoming schedule and register your teen as soon as possible so that we can start doing the amazing work with them that we've done with so many others and begin to add your teen's life into the volume of the growing number of teens out there who are applying this and going out and making our world a better place because they're equipped with what it takes to live their hero path, and they're committed to living a life that counts in a way that really matters. Thank you so much for giving your time to HeroPath, and we look forward to meeting your son or daughter very soon.